Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today's guest is someone who faced a diagnosis that will stop most people in their tracks, but came out the other side with powerful insights regarding healing and the mind and body connection. Bob Ross faced a brain cancer diagnosis that had him questioning everything that he knew about recovery, and this journey led him to discover 3 massive mistakes that people make when facing a diagnosis such as he faced. So we're going to be talking to Bob about what he discovered in his journey and how he discovered it and everything that he's up to and gonna be up to. So Mr. Ross, thank you for joining me.
It is my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
I will, and before I forget, the first thing I should do, since we're going to be talking about medical things, is give an important disclaimer. This conversation is not to be construed as medical advice. Always consult a healthcare professional prior to starting or changing any treatment program. Awesome. Now I can feel free to share. So I've had quite an amazing life. I had a passion to help people heal since I was like 6 years old. I'd ride around the neighborhood with a siren on my bicycle, bandaging people up, even if they didn't need it. And which was kind of ironic because my father was a mortician. And here I was out trying to save lives. So as I went into medicine, my dad had a great sense of humor, and he said, "Son, you're bad for business." Oh, Daddy, that's the best compliment you could ever give me. And I never lost that passion for helping people heal. My mom was actually a well-known musician, played multiple instruments, perfect pitch, beautiful voice. And so I started in college as a double major in physics and in music and realized I needed to focus on one. So I focused on music and focusing on physics and specializing then in nuclear physics. I then went on to a very famous medical school for work on a PhD in medical physics, primarily in the application of treating cancer patients. And when I was there, I helped make one of the biggest breakthroughs probably ever, until now, breakthroughs in cancer therapy, and it's called the hyperthermia effect. So hyper meaning up. So we discovered that if you increase the temperature of cancer cells, just heated them up, they got weak. Ooh, so if you just heated up the body before a treatment, sauna, of course nowadays infrared, that's even better, you could use less chemo and less radiation, which also meant less side effects. Unfortunately, it got suppressed here in the US. And as I would soon learn, the primarily reason it got suppressed was because it cut down on profit. I even found in medical journals things in nature that would cut off blood flow to tumors. Now think about it. If a tumor can't get blood flow, it can't get nutrients. If it can't get nutrients, it dies on its own. And I went to my professors all excited. "Oh, great. When are we going to start using this?" I go, "Never." I go, "But it's from nature. There are no side effects." But that's the problem, Bob. It's from nature. We can't patent it. We can't make money off of it. I was so disgusted. I'm still to this day. I ended up spending 11 years in school. I finished my internship and I walked away from the field of traditional cancer therapy. Now, as you made reference, what was very interesting when I was there at the medical school, learning to treat cancer patients, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I'm happy to say I'm doing great, but I learned a lot of lessons, especially as time passed, of the key to healing any medical issue, no matter what it is. And that is help the body to heal. So the challenge with traditional cancer therapies is they're killing cancer cells, right? Radiation and chemo, but that's not helping the body heal. In fact, the side effects from that can actually suppress the immune system, make it harder for the body to heal. And so that kind of drove me deep into what a lot of people will call natural medicine, okay? Finding things in nature. Now, I'm not opposed to prescription drugs in emergencies, they're phenomenal. But if we really want to help the body heal, we need to find the cause of that. My favorite example of that is if you moved into a new apartment and it turns out you had radioactive cobalt under the floor under your bed, it would probably give you cancer. Oh, so let's say you go get treated, you come back, but if the cobalt is still underneath the floorboard under your bed, you're now re-exposed and it's going to come back. So it's always the cause, because that's the one thing that I was really frustrated in was I wanted to know the cause. Well, why did I get this brain tumor? Well, we're really focused on what we're going to do. We're trying to do this and that and that. I said, yeah, but what about the cause? What about, the cause? Well, that was a gift. What a gift that all was, because that motivated me to dig deep into how the body heals. I'm so blessed. There are like 150 patents in my family line. So my grandfather was famous research chemist, and so I've invented things over the years, like a technique that takes away headaches in about 30 seconds based on eye movement, and I invented a brain technique. I call it the hidden secret brain technique that I basically invented for myself. Because one of the things I found when I was treating cancer patients is probably 85% of them had unresolved emotional trauma. Well, I discovered at some point that I had unresolved trauma from childhood that was so severe, my mind literally just covered it up and finally was revealed. And and so if we don't heal the cause, so if the cause is an emotional trauma, then we don't heal it, then the treatments may help, but it's not going to change the long term because of not knowing the cause. So, as you can imagine, and I was successful. I helped reprogram the limiting beliefs that I had because of that trauma. Mine was, in particular, was I didn't want to be seen. So I would self-sabotage anything that would make me be seen. So all my entrepreneur ideas, right? I would self-sabotage, but I had no idea I was doing that. My friends like, Bob, why'd you do that? I don't know. So because Curtis, the key to the brain is it has to be safe. It wants to keep you safe, whatever it thinks is safe. And if it doesn't think it's safe, it'll sabotage so that can happen. Now, unfortunately, that's also true in healing of a disease. I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer. He had a really tough childhood, didn't receive much love, and he was so overwhelmed with the love he was receiving when he got his diagnosis that he didn't want to heal. So he literally sabotaged his treatments so that he could keep getting that love that he never got as a child, and he died. So I then modified that brain technique that now I call it the hidden secret to healing brain technique, to first just to release that placebo effect. So Curtis, you might have heard about the placebo effect, where people take a sugar pill, but they think it's the real drug, and a percentage of those people will actually get healed, but they weren't given anything. In fact, if they're told about side effects, they'll have the side effects, but they weren't given anything. Now, in the medical school program, they hated the placebo effect. Oh, it's always getting in the way, of our research. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. If the mind has the ability to do what that drug does, but on its own, why don't we why don't we use that on purpose? Bob, you're not listening. There's no profit in that. And that made me even more mad and more inspired to dig deep. In fact, there was a gentleman who had severe multiple personality disorders. And one of his personalities, I should say, James, had full-blown type 1 diabetes. He was insulin dependent. Another one of his personalities, say Jimmy, had no diabetes. So, was there anything wrong with his pancreas? No. So, what was turning it on and off? His mind. That's how powerful our mind is. And we don't use it on purpose, especially not in medicine. A good example, if a doctor gave you a prescription for an antibiotic, and if he said, this is the best antibiotic on the planet for exactly what you have, it would work better, even though the chemicals are the same as what they always were, because our belief is if it's going to help. In fact, I was so blessed to be raised in a loving Christian home. I mean, kids would flock to our house because it's grace and mercy and forgiveness. And I never could understand why in Scripture God asked for our faith for healing. Well, why does God need my help? My help. Right? I can imagine God saying, oh, if only Bobby Boy would believe I could pull this off. That never made sense. No one could ever answer that question. And then all of a sudden, I got it. The people that get the benefit of the sugar pill are those that have belief. In other words, they have the faith that it's the real drug. And so the insight I got was that ability, miraculous ability for the body to heal that's in our mind is already in there. It's like water that's already in a pipe. And faith is what turns it on and lets it flow. And a little bit later, I'll tell you about the latest breakthrough and how we can apply all that. So, have you any questions so far, Curtis? I know it's a lot.
Yeah, you talk about the three massive mistakes that people make. What is the first one, and why do people keep falling into it?
So, um, the first mistake is if you remember high school biology.
Let's take a quick break.
In Kansas, blind vending operators are vanishing without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses, only silence. Detective Michael Miguel thought he had seen everything, but this case pulls him into something far darker. A web of institutional corruption so deep it was never meant to be uncovered. When vulnerable blind people disappear and bureaucracies close ranks, one question remains. Who will fight for justice? As Miguel digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power, a system that exploits the very people it was designed to protect. The truth is buried in paperwork, hidden behind closed doors, guarded by those who have everything to lose. Some conspiracies hide in plain sight. This one hides in the dark. Iron Cane Media presents The Blind Conspiracy, written by Mikhail Battles Sr., available now on Amazon.
Every cell, every organism has to have a certain environment to survive. Well, cancer cells are no different. So I call it the big three. So they have to have an acidic environment, and most of us, because of our lifestyle, are acidic. They have to have um, low oxygen levels. And that's interesting because normally healthy cells need high oxygen levels. So all cancer cells have to have three things to survive. They need to be in an acidic environment, and because of our lifestyle, we're generally acidic. They need low oxygen levels. Now, normal cells need good oxygen levels, so they have to have low oxygen levels. And the third thing they have to have is a lot of sugar, especially refined processed sugar. Processed sugar is the big thing that cancer cells thrive on. And that's why we talked about earlier about if we cut off the blood flow to tumors, they wouldn't get that sugar and they would automatically die. So that's a great thing. In fact, my website is thehiddensecrettohealing.com. And there's a free 45-minute master class that'll talk about the secret three and what you can do, talk more about the placebo effect and dive deep into that, and kind of talk about the latest breakthrough as well. And it's all free on the site.
Well, at a high level, can you explain what the hidden secret brain technique is?
Yes. So, um, especially since I had that diagnosis of the brain tumor, and I thought, well, wait a minute, how did my brain adapt? Because there was no change in function and ability and intelligence. So basically, the brain rewired itself around, and so I was so fascinated. And then when it came time to understanding that I was self-sabotaging, this came actually as a like a download that the brain has to work on questions. So I should say, it has to answer questions. That's probably a better way to say that. The brain has to answer questions, even if it's a stupid question. And that's why affirmations aren't very effective because they're statements. So the conscious part of our mind, the things we're just normally aware of, right, is like a filter. And the subconscious part of our mind that controls our breathing and our heart rate, controls healing in the body. That's going to be really key when we talk later. That's where all those beliefs are, what we really believe. So if someone said to me, Bob, I don't think you're very intelligent. Now, my conscious mind would hear that, but it would compare to what I believe to be true in my subconscious mind. I go, no, I think I'm intelligent, right? And it would reject it. So it would mark it as incorrect. But if enough people, enough time said, Bob, I like you, man, but you are not very intelligent, then all of a sudden it becomes a question mark. Huh. And especially with little kids that are so influenced, first 8 years of life, especially, um, they actually then will believe it. And guess what their behavior changes to? Someone who's not intelligent. So suddenly they were just fine. Now they're, what, what's going on with Johnny? Huge. And unfortunately, Curtis, most of the questions we ask ourselves are negative. Why am I always late? Why can't I do this? Why can't and the brain, right? Your conscious mind is going to compare to the subconscious mind that knows why supposedly you do all these things. And so one of the biggest breakthroughs ever for people is first ask a question, but ask a positive question. So as an example, if I said, oh, why am I such a bad uncle? Well, my brain's going to give me reasons. Well, because you missed the birthday. But instead, I ask what, and I ask, how am I a great uncle? Not how am I going to be? That's the thing I discovered about the subconscious mind. It only knows the now. You might have heard of Eckhart Tolle. He wrote a great book, The Power of Now, because that's all your subconscious mind does not know tomorrow or next day or whatever. So that's why you say, how am I, meaning right now, a great uncle? And remember, your mind has to answer that question. And so all of a sudden, you're going to get creative ideas, inspiration of how you can be a great uncle. Huge, huge. So remember, we talked about how kids are so susceptible in the first 8 years? It's because their brain waves are slow. So that's the thing about the brain. Most of the time, we're in beta. Right now, you and I are in beta, pretty fast frequency. When we meditate, we just do deep breathing for a while. That slows the brain wave down, and we can literally feel it in our body how we will relax. Well, it turns out the magic brain frequency for transformation is theta, which is below alpha, and it's right before you fall asleep. And notice you're only aware of it for like 5 seconds. You might feel like you're floating or might see images, even if you don't normally have images, like you're not a visual person, and then you fall into delta, which is sleep. It turns into theta frequency. You have direct access to reprogram those limiting beliefs. So my brain technique is a way to get into theta without falling asleep, how to phrase what you want to have happen in a certain manner, including make it into a question that has to be in now and some other cool things. And then the brain naturally will reprocess that. So you've probably heard about people that get sick all the time, and when you talk to them, they're what we call a hypochondriac. Oh, I must be getting this. I must be getting that. And because of that belief, their body will have the symptoms of the disease they're thinking about. So um, just from that alone, right? If you combine that with the power of the placebo effect, if you convince your subconscious mind that what the treatment that you're receiving, whatever that treatment is, then it's going to work better. In fact, I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer, and they were putting her under pretty harsh chemotherapy, and the doc said, "Now, just so you know, you're going to lose your hair." She said, "Well, I don't want to lose my hair." Well, no, everybody, 100% of people lose their hair. Well, I don't want to lose my hair. And I taught her my brain technique. Of course, I tried to say, "Well, do this first before you do the chemo." That's my recommendation because you're not in a rush. You've got some time, but I understand. I support anything you want to do. And so I taught her this brain technique, and that she used it to eliminate that side effect of losing her hair. And guess what? She was only person ever getting that chemo that didn't lose their hair. That's the power of our mind that we can actually use on purpose. Oh,
What
it's so exciting.
what role what role does the subconscious or the emotional brain play in conditions such as PTSD and of course cancer and addiction?
Oh, that's a great, great question, Curtis. So in fact, that's a good segue because we knew that if people were under a lot of stress, that would lower their immune system and more susceptible to getting disease, including cancer and all sorts of things. And like I say, 85% of my cancer patients that I treated had unresolved emotional trauma, which again would make sense that it would suppress their immune system. But what has been discovered, and this is one of the biggest breakthroughs in medicine, is that probably 80% of all medical problems, hypothyroidism, kidney problems, you name it, are a result of an emotional shock event. Now, it doesn't have to be devastating, it doesn't have to be life threatening. It has to be sudden, unexpected, catching you off guard, and how you feel isolated. So, an example would be if a mother's child got hit by a car, they didn't have to see it, but suddenly the child got in bad shape. So that emotional response will cause a physiological change in their body, and it's always positive. In fact, what's interesting is they will get breast cancer now, and it's 100% correlation, right? And biologically, the reason that the body increases that estrogen and so forth is for the breast to produce more milk. Why? To nurture the child that was injured. So there was and I got this insight along the way. And as I love how things like this happen, clear around the world in Germany, another medical doctor who specialized in treating cancer patients had the same insight, and he had like 50,000 cancer patients over his career, and he was a meticulous scientist documenting everything. And he noticed this, people that have breast cancer have a sudden loss or sudden need for trying to take care of their child. Um, and so he made records of that. Probably the most easy example to understand is that a man whose child dies, the biological response is his testosterone goes through the roof. Now, the reason the testosterone goes through the roof is biologically to replace the missing child. In fact, it's so high that often his wife will get horny just standing around him. Again, the purpose of that is to replace the child that died. Well, the downside of that high testosterone is it gives what we call testicular cancer. Now, here is the amazing thing. Once his wife gets pregnant, or if he just heals the emotional trauma of that, and we'll talk about that in a bit, just heals that emotional trauma. The body doesn't need that biological response anymore. It'll lower the testosterone levels back to normal, and the body will dissolve the testicular cancer. The body has the ability to dissolve that testicular cancer. And we know that we get cancer cells pop up every single day of our lives. So it's not an odd thing. It's not out of realm of nature. It's just part of nature. And it turns out if we have a strong immune system, it's constantly looking for viruses and things. When it detects that, it produces interferon, interleukin, and anti-neoplastins, and literally takes care of the cancer cells. Happens all day, every day, and which means our body has that ability to heal. Now, with uh, with phobias and addictions and post-traumatic stress disorder, going back to that example of the mom, if she saw her child get hit by a car, not only would she have that biological response, the same biological response, but that memory would be so shocking that it would literally cause an electrical disturbance in her nervous system. Now, the technical term is electrical perturbation. I like to call it an electrical tumor. So you might even notice when you see something, right? Well, in order for that to happen, you have to have a jolt of electricity in your body. Well, what that does, associated with the trauma, is it causes that disturbance in your nervous system. Now, I'm really in favor of talk therapy initially after a trauma. So one of the things I have been doing for many, many years now is volunteering with a fire department on their EMS reserve, their medical reserve, because we're the best in the world for trauma, right? We literally help people heal. We save lives. It's awesome. And obviously, they're firefighters because of the things we see and so forth. Can have that trauma. Well, since there's an electrical disturbance in the nervous system, talk therapy, think about it, talk therapy is not electrical therapy. So it's very helpful initially. We do that automatically after a bad call, before we even get back to the station, especially after we all get back to the station. We talk about the call. We talk about, things we did and how we can do things better, maybe, and all that. But since it's not electrical, it really doesn't treat the electrical tumor in the body. So the reason we sleep, I should say, we dream while we sleep, is to help process those events so they don't become post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so obviously something that dramatic would be too much for the brain to process. And that's why, if you think about it, people have triggers. So someone back from Afghanistan, and they hear a loud bang, just a car backfiring, they'll often throw themselves to the ground, screaming, "Incoming!" Why is it that sudden? They don't think, "Oh, that's a bang like I heard before." No, it's that basically that electrical perturbation, electrical tumor getting triggered, like poking the bear, and it's instant, and they react. So I was so blessed, and everything was. I'm telling you, I can't believe how many things were orchestrated. I believe by the divine to meet people, to study under them. And I studied with Gary Craig, who invented EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. It's also known as tapping, because it turns out uh, if you tap where a nerve comes to the surface of the skin, so one of them is right at the start of the eyebrow. So it has to be exactly where that nerve comes to the surface of the skin. When you tap on a nerve, it sends an electrical signal down that nerve. Just like when the doctor taps on your knee, he's checking for your nerve function in your knee. So it's pure physiology. This isn't woo woo. This isn't any of that stuff. It's pure physiology. And here's the great thing, Curtis. Your subconscious mind knows where in your nervous system that electrical perturbation is from that trauma. So, like for that mother, if she just thought about even just one aspect, usually one aspect at a time is best, just the visual, just what she saw, okay? And just tapped on these spots, the brain will send those electrical signals being generated to that electrical perturbation and it'll dissolve it. And when it's dissolved, the post traumatic stress disorder is gone. Not just minimized, it's gone. With phobias, same thing. There's always a cause. People don't have phobias for fun. Always a cause. And a lot of times they don't know the cause. That's the great thing about the tapping is they'll often get that cause just by starting the process of, well, just tap with what you know. Oh, here's a great example. Oh, and I also get intuitive hits. So I get a lot of intuition. So I'll get very specific stuff. So I got an email from someone who had seen my um, headache relief technique, and she asked, "Hey, does it work on migraines?" Well, yes, but you have to do it as soon as you feel that migraine coming on, because once it's set in place, it's like a claw, and then it's not very effective. Now, tapping actually is pretty good for migraines, it turns out. Um, so I said, "Well, what physically is wrong with you that's causing the migraines?" And she said, "Well, they can't find anything wrong with me." Really? I love when I hear things like that. Okay, here we go. And she was up in Washington somewhere, and so I just emailed her the spots uh, we were going to tap. We did it on the phone, and as we're tapping, we're just tapping on what was present: the light sensitivity, the nausea, right? What the pain in the migraine felt like. And about 10 minutes in, I actually got the hit. I got the clue, and I heard 14. I literally heard in my head 14. Her name wasn't Mary, but we'll call her Mary. "Hey, Mary, what happened when you were 14?" And she just started to, oh, I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Made you cry." "Well, what happened when you were 14?" "Well, my mom got remarried and my stepdad started abusing me." "Oh, Mary, I'm so sorry." "So, Mary, out of curiosity, when did your migraine start?" "When I was 14." "Oh." "And Mary, how did the migraines play into the abuse?" Oh, Curtis, that's what you wait for. You wait for that aha moment. She said, "The only time he wouldn't abuse me is when I had a migraine." Mary, that's how powerful you are. You were giving yourself a migraine to protect you. Remember, the subconscious mind's job is to keep us safe. Unbelievable. And I asked us, "Is he even still alive?" "No, he's passed away." "But you still get migraines?" "Yeah." "Mary, I bet you get a migraine when you don't feel safe." Oh, Bob, I'd never thought of that. So obviously, we stopped just working on migraines in general and went back to that abuse. Now, in that case, this is very important. In that case, it was not a single event, it was multiple events, which usually takes multiple sessions to finally collapse it. A single event, like being in a car crash or seeing someone hit by a car or something like that, are often gone in one session. I see miracles. I love it.
Well, were there ever any moments of fear and doubt where you felt like this approach would not personally work for you?
That's a great question. Yes. First off, because it seemed like it was too good to be true. And one of the beautiful things about this, and my YouTube page is youtube.com/ at the hidden secret to healing. And they can see a video on it, a training that I did. I did like a 3-minute follow along for stress release. Um, and that'll kind of get anybody listening an experience of this because it turns out it has nothing to do with belief. You don't have to believe that EFT tapping works because it's all physiological. It's how God designed our body to get trauma and also to heal from it. Oh, in fact, at one of the workshops where Gary Craig was teaching this, there were two psychologists that were there specifically to mock him. They were, heckling him, saying, "You're a fraud. This is bunk science," all that. And when it came to the practice session, he said to the two psychologists, "Well, do you have any unresolved emotions?" So, "Well, everybody does." "Well, sure we do." "Okay, well, you work on each other. You know it doesn't work. You know this is fraud. This is bunk. So there's no placebo effect involved. In fact, it's nocebo, right? You can prevent things from working if you don't believe, and and just do this on each other. Both of them got healed of their unresolved emotional trauma. Unbelievable. And so the more that I saw, and the more I believed, then my gift started opening up, and I personally were seeing, I still see wonderful miracles. In fact, a guy from back from Afghanistan, severe abdominal pain, lower right quadrant. Okay, and they couldn't find anything wrong with him. X-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, ultrasound, nothing. They couldn't find. Oh, really? So we just tapped on what was present, the pain, what it felt like. Does it move? Does it have a color, a shape? Right? And about 10 minutes in, he goes, "Oh," I said, "Oh, you got the memory. Oh, no, this has nothing to do with this." Well, that's okay. Just tell me what popped into your mind. Well, we were on patrol and a landmine went off to our right, and my best friend was standing to my right. He took the brunt of the blast. We didn't have a medic in our platoon, and he's pleading with me, don't let me die, don't let me die. And he died in my arms. I said, "Oh, my friend, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened." So, out of curiosity, where was your friend injured? Right here. And he pointed to exactly where he's had that pain for years.
Well, let's
So we
talk
went
about.
back. So I was just going to say, so we went back to the visuals of that incident, the sights, the sounds, the smells, right? All the senses. And he couldn't get upset about it. Now he was still sad about it. Doesn't erase the memory. He's still sad about it, but no more abdominal pain ever since.
Let's talk to the listeners about your 45-minute masterclass.
Absolutely. So when I received my diagnosis, in fact, it was just like in the movies, right? I had what they call hypersomnia. So it's the opposite of insomnia. So I could fall asleep, but I had trouble waking up no matter how much sleep I got. And it got worse and worse and worse to the point I wake, my alarm would go off after 8, 9 hours, 10 hours of sleep, and I'd feel like someone had called me in the middle of the night. It could be your mother calling you. Whoa, what? And I went to a neurologist, and they did an EEG, so electric activity of my brain test, and they did a CAT scan of my brain. And I go in there uh, for the results, and he said, "Well, Bob, I've got good news and bad news." "All right, doc, let's start with the good news." "Well, the good news is your EEG, the electric activity of your brain, is abnormal." "Abnormal? Doc, I asked for the good news." "Well, Bob, compared to the bad news, that is good news." And he put the CAT scan up in the viewfinder, and I could see it from where I was sitting. Right? And he said, there's a brain tumor. It's in your left temporal lobe, which actually regulates sleep, which would make sense of why all this is happening. So, because of going through this whole process, I understand the emotions, especially the fear that comes with a diagnosis, and especially how they tell the person about the diagnosis. So when a doctor is, glum, like, "Well, this is not good," that actually suppresses the ability of the body to heal. If the doctor is still honest but was very positive, "Okay, we've got all these great things we're going to do," the chances of healing would actually increase. So part of the 45-minute masterclass is the things that I learned, because for the first, I remember the time frame before I was put in intensive care, um, I wasn't that traumatized because I treated myself like I was one of my patients. So I was digging into research and doing this. "Oh, this is fascinating." But then when I was put into intensive care for 8 days and they did barbaric things to me, they were trying to help. I understand, but they were barbaric. That's when the reality hit. So the first little bit is just how to how to kind of reframe things to help you process that. Um, Make your body hostile to cancer cells, right? So if you change the pH, you increase your oxygen levels. There are very practical ways to do that. Um, and you cut out your refined processed sugar. Now, what's interesting with sugar a whole orange, a whole apple, that will actually kill cancer cells or help your body kill cancer cells. Refined processed sugar gives the strength to the cancer cells. They have an unbelievable appetite. Their metabolism is so high. That's a lot of people waste away with cancer because it's stealing glucose um, from the rest of the body. And then we'll talk about um, reframing how you look at cancer. The whole idea of the war on cancer is actually misplaced because it's our own cells, right? It's our own cells that mutated. We don't take war against our whole body. In fact, people that just reframe it and send love to their cancer, which seems so bizarre, but send love because again, there's always a biological purpose. Something had to cause that. And a lot of times people that do get cancer diagnoses, they say it was the best thing that could have happened. It changed my priorities in life. I suddenly started appreciating even the little things, right? So there are actual blessings that can come. And then the last section is about how to use that placebo effect on purpose to help yourself heal.
All right. Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Mm, yes, yes, yes. Well, I can't let the bag out of the hat earlier, but I have the two sites, the hidden secret to healing.com, and then I have the hidden secret to emotional healing.com. And so that's my website for people that need extra help with phobias and addictions, um, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumas to actually heal that. It's actually part of my course that I have. It's like a coaching program for cancer patients. But this is separate where they can get one-on-one direct help. In fact, I helped a person who had a phobia of dogs for over 40 years. I mean, outrageous phobia. They jump up on a car from little Chihuahua, right? And so as we went through the process, he got the memory from when he was a young child. He was riding his bicycle in Minnesota, and this dog was trying to bite him and rabid, foaming at the mouth. Rah! And that's what caused his phobia to happen because the dog was big compared to his size as a child. And in one session, he couldn't get upset. If he before we started, he closed his eyes. Just think about a dog; he would literally start sweating. After a 1 hour session, he couldn't get upset. He went to visit his sister who was getting married. She had a big dog. The dog ran up to him when she opened the door. He wasn't upset. She said, "Let's go to the dog park." No, they go to the dog park. All these dogs running around. He wasn't upset at all. In fact, I saw him the other day, and he said, "Bob, it's been 4 years since you helped me. I haven't had a fear of dogs since then. In fact, I have adopted a dog." That is the power of resolving these things. It radically changes your life. It's like being dragged, along all your life with this unresolved emotional trauma. And as we talked about, um, a certain emotional trauma will cause hypothyroidism, and a different, very similar emotional trauma will cause thyroid cancer. So one is the proliferation of cells, that's thyroid cancer, and the other is deterioration or taking down of the cells. And since the key to all of this is healing the emotional trauma that caused these things is so powerful, um, once that's healed, the body automatically goes into the healing phase. Now, the one thing I didn't mention that this German physician found out is because he kept meticulous notes, as I mentioned, that if a person it took 8 years, I mean, 8 months to resolve that emotional trauma, then the body would take 8 months to heal. It was like a 1-to-1. Now, biologically, he didn't know why. I don't know why. But then that's when my little brain said, wait a minute, maybe it doesn't need to be a 1-to-1. So remember the placebo effect. People sometimes instantly get healed. Sometimes they're healed in a couple of days just because they believed the treatment is going to help them. So by modifying the technique, basically, it's going to instruct the subconscious mind once that emotional trauma is healed, and now the body wants to go into that, or actually goes into that healing mode, to speed up that healing as fast as it's safe as possible. Now, sometimes it's not safe to heal instantly, right? Your body has to make all these adjustments. You might have heard about the term healing crisis. So when you're healing, you can actually have symptoms that don't feel good, right? But that's actually just indication that your body is actually healing. So sometimes it might need a week, it might need a couple of weeks, right? But generally speaking, it should not need that whole time. So in fact, when they go to the hiddensecrettohealing.com site and they opt in so they can watch the webinar, I just uploaded a video describing this and gave some visuals so they can actually see what's happening. Curtis, I am so excited. I'm about to jump out of my skin. The possibilities with this are enormous.
Absolutely. We'll close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or, any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Absolutely. So let's see. What would be a great thing? Oh, no, I'm going to talk about that in that little video. So they'll see that. Because often physical trauma will cause a biological response and then the body heals. Um, yes, the most important thing that they can take away from this little podcast is the body is designed to heal. And the key to medicine is helping the body heal. If you cut yourself, the only thing we have to do to help the body is apply direct pressure to the wound so that the edges of the skin that have been cut stay together. And it's the body's amazing healing ability that seals that up. It reattaches the two sides of the skin that were separated because of the cut. It increases the clotting factor for that to happen. And oftentimes we'll grow new skin so there's not even a scar. If we get a cold or a flu, if the immune system is good, it has the ability to heal that without us having to do anything other than what I would say is believe in the healing ability of your body. So when they have that mindset, oh man, my body is an amazing healing, and I'm going to use my mind and my beliefs to increase and let that healing flow.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so be sure to check out Bob's videos and everything that he's up to. And, if you know of anybody that can use Bob's work to help them, or you yourself, please be sure to follow, rate, review, and share this episode to as many people as possible, because Bob is doing a lot of things to help people. Also,
absolutely.
Yeah, and also go sign up for that Living the Dream newsletter at www.curveball337.com and share that as well, the site, to as many people you know. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Bob, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, and blessings to you all.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.